The market street was almost empty, only broken stalls and scattered ashes remained. A cold wind blew, carrying the smell of burned wood and spoiled food. Daniel walked slowly, his boots crunching over the dirt, looking for some spare work. He was a human, one of the few living in that alien city, and most people did not notice him. His clothes were simple, patched many times, and his hands were rough from years of labor. That night, he carried a small box of food, the only hot meal he had earned after a long day. It was not much, only bread, stew, and a flask of warm drink. To him, it was enough, maybe even too much, but still the only comfort he had. As he passed the broken stalls, he heard a faint sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he stopped. It was crying. Soft, weak, almost lost in the night. He followed the sound and found them, two small figures huddled in a corner, their thin arms wrapped around each other. Their clothes were torn, dirty, and their faces streaked with dust. They were alien girls, but very young, maybe no more than 9 or 10. Their eyes were wide and glowing faintly in the dark, a trait of their species. They shivered, not only from cold, but also from hunger and fear. Daniel stood still. He knew what they were, orphans. Everyone in the city knew the war had left many children alone. Most people ignored them. Some even threw stones at them, saying they were cursed. Orphans were seen as useless, mouths with no worth. He had seen others walk past starving children, pretending not to hear. Even now, a pair of alien merchants passed nearby, saw the girls, and turned away without a word. One even muttered, "Better if they disappear, less burden." Daniel clenched his jaw. He wanted to move on too, because his meal was all he had, but his feet did not move. The girls noticed him. Their eyes met his, wide with fear, ready to run if he came closer. They expected the usual, harsh words, maybe a kick to chase them away. But Daniel did not speak. Instead, he crouched down, setting his box of food on the ground. The smell of warm stew escaped into the cold night. The younger girl's nose twitched, and she whispered something in her sister's ear. The older one held her back, shaking her head as if saying, "Don't trust." Daniel opened the lid and broke the bread into halves. His hands shook slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of his choice. This food was his only meal, and tomorrow he had no idea if he would earn more. He pushed the bread toward them and gently said, "Eat." His voice was soft, not commanding. The older girl blinked, unsure. Then hunger won. Slowly, they moved closer, their small hands reaching out. When the bread touched their lips, they devoured it with trembling urgency. Daniel poured stew into a small bowl and slid it forward. They grabbed it together, sipping quickly, the steam rising around their dirty faces. For a moment, silence ruled the street, broken only by the sound of their eating. Daniel watched them, his chest tight. He remembered himself as a child, hungry, ignored, surviving on scraps. That memory made the scene harder to bear. When they finished, they licked the bowl clean, afraid to leave a single drop. Daniel handed them his flask of warm drink. They hesitated, but then the younger one took it and drank. The warmth spread into her body, and her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "No one has ever been kind to us before." The older sister pulled her close, glaring at Daniel with suspicion, but her eyes also softened. Daniel said nothing. He simply nodded, as if to say they did not owe him thanks. For a while they sat there, the girls clutching the empty bowl, Daniel sitting with his empty box. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. The night felt colder now, yet something inside him felt warmer. He wanted to ask their names, but he knew it might be dangerous. If others heard him care, they might use it against the girls. In this city, kindness was often punished, so he stood slowly, brushing dust from his clothes. The girls looked up, worried he might take back the food. Instead, he gave a small smile. "Stay strong," he said. Then he turned and walked away into the night. The younger girl whispered something to her sister. The older one nodded, her eyes following Daniel until he disappeared into the shadows. They would never forget his face. At that moment, far away in the dark corner of the street, someone else was watching. A tall figure cloaked in black observed the scene carefully. His eyes glowed faintly as he lifted a small communicator to his lips. His voice was low, secretive. He has no idea what he just did. Mark this human. Remember him. Then the figure melted back into the night, leaving only the silent girls, holding the warmth of a stranger's kindness inside them. Daniel walked home, his stomach empty, but his heart heavy with strange feelings. He did not know why he had stopped, why he had shared his only meal. Maybe because deep down, he hated seeing anyone suffer the way he once had. As he reached his small house, he sighed and lay down on his bed. Hunger gnawed at him, but he closed his eyes. In his dreams, he saw the girls again, but this time not as orphans. They stood tall, strong, with eyes full of power. He shook his head in sleep, not knowing that this simple dream would one day become reality. 10 years passed like a whisper carried by the wind. Daniel's life did not change much. He still lived on the edge of the alien city, working with his hands, repairing machines no one else wanted to touch. His small farm had grown into something steady but not rich. He fixed broken tools, patched engines, and sometimes traded old metal for food. People in the city still looked at him the same way they always had, just another poor human trying to survive. He did not expect more, and he did not ask for more. To him, survival was enough. But every now and then, when he sat at his small wooden table with a simple bowl of soup, his mind returned to that night long ago. He could still see the two small alien girls, their glowing eyes wide with fear, their tiny hands shaking as they ate his food. He never learned their names. He never saw them again. Sometimes he wondered if they had starved after he left, or if they had found safety somewhere. Other times, he told himself it was better not to know. But the memory would not leave him. It lived inside him, like an old scar that no one could see. Outside, the galaxy was changing. Rumors drifted into the city about powerful dynasties rising, about royal houses gathering fleets so large they could block out the stars. Whole planets were conquered, and strange banners waved over the ruins of cities. Some spoke of new alliances, others of endless war. Daniel paid little attention. Politics meant nothing to a man who spent his days fixing plows and patching holes in water pumps. What difference did it make to him who sat on a distant throne? He had no power, no voice in such matters. He just kept his head low and worked, day after day. Still, he noticed things. Sometimes alien warships flew across the sky, their engines rumbling like thunder. The ground would shake, and children would run out of their houses to point at the lights above. Adults stayed inside, pretending not to care. Just another fleet passing, they would say. But Daniel could not help but wonder why more and more ships appeared with each season. It was as if the galaxy itself was moving towards something heavy, something dangerous. Daniel grew older, his face lined with years of quiet struggle. His hair turned gray at the edges, and his hands grew more calloused. Yet he remained strong enough to work. He had learned to live without expecting kindness from others. In fact, the only act of kindness he truly remembered was the one he had given, not the one he had received. That thought sometimes made him laugh bitterly. What a strange world where the only warmth he could recall was the warmth he gave away. One evening, Daniel sat outside his small home, watching the sky turn dark. The stars were bright, scattered across the heavens like silver dust. His old dog lay at his feet, ears twitching as if listening to something far away. Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. He had worked all day repairing a broken tractor for a neighbor, but instead of payment, the man had only offered him half a sack of grain. It was unfair, but Daniel accepted it. That was life. Humans were always given the scraps, never the full share. He looked at the stars again and thought of the girls. Did they ever look up at the sky too? Did they even survive this long? Suddenly, the ground trembled under his feet. The chair rattled, and his dog leapt up, barking wildly. Daniel froze, thinking it was an earthquake. But then he heard it, the deep roar of engines, louder than anything he had heard before. The sky lit up with a faint glow, shadows stretching across the ground. Daniel's heart began to pound. Warships sometimes passed, yes, but never this low, never this close. The air shook as if the heavens were about to break open. Neighbors rushed out of their houses, pointing at the horizon. Some shouted in fear. Others fell to their knees, thinking it was the end. The glow grew brighter, closer, until Daniel could see the shape, massive, gleaming, not like the ordinary warships that roared past in the distance. This one was different. It moved with slow, heavy grace, as if it was not a weapon but a monument in the sky. His dog growled, its eyes fixed upward, sensing something vast and powerful. Daniel's hands gripped the edge of his chair, his knuckles white. The ship lowered. The roar became a vibration that shook his very chest. Dust and loose stones danced across the ground. Some neighbors screamed, running back into their homes, slamming doors shut. Others stayed frozen, staring in disbelief. Daniel rose to his feet, shielding his eyes against the light. The ship was lowering toward his farm. His farm, of all places. He muttered, confused, "Why here?" His voice was lost in the thunder of engines. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound slowed. The ship hovered above his field, massive and silent, casting his small home in shadow. Its surface gleamed like polished silver, lined with symbols he had never seen. It was not a warship. It looked more like a palace floating in the sky. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything so enormous, so beautiful, and so terrifying at the same time. The air smelled of burning metal, hot and sharp. His neighbors whispered from a distance, their voices sharp with fear. Why is it here? Who are they coming for? It must be a punishment. Some even muttered that Daniel had angered some alien lord, that he was about to be taken away for execution. Daniel himself could not answer. His mind spun with questions. Why would such a ship that looked as if it belonged to kings, stop here at his small and forgotten farm? His dog barked louder, but Daniel could not move. His body felt locked, his heart pounding against his ribs. The ship's lower doors began to glow with light, like the mouth of some giant beast preparing to open. Daniel took a single step back, his breath shallow. He wanted to run, but his legs would not obey. The night was no longer quiet. It was alive, heavy with something vast and unknown. Something had come for him, and he had no idea why. The morning air was heavy with silence. Daniel had not slept well. All night he heard the distant hum of engines, felt the tremors in the earth, and saw flashes of strange light through the cracks of his window. When dawn finally came, he thought maybe it had all been a dream. But when he opened the door to step outside, his heart nearly stopped. Above his small farm hovered a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. It was enormous, a floating palace of steel and light, its surface gleaming with polished silver and gold lines that caught the rising sun. It seemed too beautiful to be real, yet too terrifying to ignore. Its size was so great that it cast a vast shadow over his house, his fields, and even the road leading into the village. Birds did not dare fly near it. The air around it seemed charged, alive with quiet power. On the ground before his home stood rows of soldiers. Their armor shimmered like liquid metal, sharp and precise, reflecting the light of the ship above. They were not the ragged fighters he sometimes saw in the city. These were elite warriors, disciplined and silent. They carried long weapons that pulsed faintly with energy, and their glowing eyes never blinked. What startled Daniel most was not their weapons, but their posture. They were standing in perfect lines, heads bowed toward his house, as if waiting for someone important. Daniel's neighbors had gathered at the edge of the fields, whispering loudly, but afraid to step closer. He could hear fragments of their voices carried on the wind. What has he done? Why would nobles come to him? This is dangerous. Some children pointed, their parents pulling them back quickly as if even looking too long might bring punishment. None of them dared cross into the shadow of the ship. Daniel gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. His heart hammered in his chest. He could not understand why this was happening. He was only a farmer, a mechanic, a man who barely had enough to feed himself. Why would soldiers, nobles, and a ship of such grandeur stop here? Why his home? Then, with a hiss-like air escaping from the heavens, a large opening formed on the side of the ship. Golden light poured out, so bright that some villagers shielded their eyes. A ramp extended downward with slow grace, each movement perfect, like a ritual. Daniel felt his stomach twist, unsure if he should run or kneel or simply collapse. Two figures appeared at the top of the ramp. They were tall, regal, dressed in garments that shimmered like woven starlight. Their robes carried symbols that Daniel could not read, but even he could tell they were marks of high rank, perhaps even royalty. Guards flanked them, moving with synchronized steps, but it was clear the two women in the center were the ones commanding respect. They descended slowly, their faces hidden behind ornate masks made of crystal and silver. The masks covered everything but their glowing eyes, which shone like living jewels. The sight made Daniel's breath catch. No one in his village had ever seen nobles like these up close. These were not merchants. not travelers. These were leaders of a dynasty, the kind spoken of in fearful whispers. As they reached the bottom of the ramp, the soldiers around them knelt. Daniel's neighbors gasped in shock. Never before had they seen an entire royal guard kneel at once. The ground itself seemed to tremble with the weight of the moment. The two masked women walked forward, their steps light, deliberate, filled with an unspoken power. They passed the rows of soldiers and stopped only a few steps away from Daniel's small door. Daniel could not move. His body was frozen, his throat dry. His dog growled beside him, hackles raised, sensing both danger and something beyond its understanding. The women stood in silence for a moment, their eyes fixed on him. Then one of them, taller and carrying herself with absolute grace, raised her hand. The soldiers behind her immediately lowered their heads even further, as if the ground itself was more worthy than their faces. The woman spoke, her voice soft but carrying a tone of command. "It is him." The other woman's voice trembled slightly, full of something Daniel could not name. "After all these years?" Her hands shook as she reached up and touched her mask. Slowly, she removed it. Gasps rippled through the soldiers and villagers alike. Beneath the mask was a face both alien and beautiful, but it was her expression that struck Daniel most. Her eyes were filled with tears. Daniel blinked, confused. He did not know her. Or at least he thought he didn't. He had seen many faces in his life, but this one, something about it pulled at an old memory buried deep in his mind. The woman's lips trembled, as though she were afraid of what he might say. Then she whispered words that sent chills racing down his spine. "It's him. The man who gave us food." Daniel's breath caught. His mind flashed back to that cold night 10 years ago, to the two starving girls huddled in the shadows, their small hands clutching the bread and stew he had shared. His chest tightened, his vision blurred with shock. Could it be? Could these women, these noble figures, be the same helpless children he had once fed? Before he could speak, the taller woman removed her mask as well. Her face was stronger, sharper, but her eyes glistened the same way as her sister's. She stepped forward and, to the astonishment of everyone present, dropped to one knee before him. Her voice rang clear in the morning air. "We have found you at last." Daniel's neighbors gasped so loudly that the sound carried across the entire field. Soldiers shifted, but did not move, their discipline unbroken. Daniel's dog whined, pressing against his leg, sensing his confusion. Daniel himself could only stare in disbelief. Nobles, leaders of fleets, kneeling before a poor human farmer. The image was so impossible, so unreal, that his mind struggled to accept it. The younger woman reached forward, her hand trembling. "You saved our lives," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Without you, we would have died. Without you, none of this would exist." She gestured toward the ship, the soldiers, the power they now held. Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. His heart raced, his mind spun, and still he could not make sense of what was happening. The only thing he knew for certain was this. The two orphans he once gave a warm meal had returned, not as children, but as rulers. And now they stood at his door, declaring him the reason they still lived. Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he thought everyone around could hear it. His throat was dry, his hands cold, and his legs weak. The two alien women stood in front of him, masks now removed, their glowing eyes fixed on him as though he was the most important man in the galaxy. He wanted to deny it, to say they had the wrong person, but the truth hit him like a hammer. He remembered the girls' faces from 10 years ago, small and dirty, shivering as they ate the bread he had given them. The memory burned fresh now, and he could see those same faces in these women, older and stronger, but carrying the same light in their eyes. Daniel shook his head slowly, whispering, "It can't be. It was only food, only one meal." His voice trembled, but the women's expressions grew even softer. The taller one stepped closer, her robe brushing against the dirt of his farm. She looked nothing like the starving girl he had once seen, but her voice carried the same fragile tone. "That meal saved us," she said. "We were so close to death, our bodies weak, our hope gone. That bread, that warm stew, it gave us the strength to hold on until help came." The younger sister spoke next, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Others spat at us. Others called us cursed. You were the only one who looked at us as if we were not worthless. You gave without asking. That night, we decided that if we ever lived long enough to rise, we would never forget you." She dropped to her knees again, ignoring the shocked gasps of soldiers and villagers alike. Her voice cracked, but her words carried like thunder. "We are here because of you." Daniel took a step back, his chest tightening. He looked at the soldiers kneeling, the ship towering above, the two powerful women before him. None of it made sense. He was only a farmer, only a poor mechanic who barely had enough for himself. How could his small act lead to this? His neighbors were still whispering in fear behind him. Some muttered that he must have done something to trick the nobles, that some dark deal was being revealed. Daniel wanted to shout that they were wrong, that he was just as confused as they were, but his voice would not rise above a whisper. The taller sister removed a pendant from around her neck. It glowed faintly with a symbol of their royal house. She held it up for him to see. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. Daniel shook his head silently. She smiled faintly. "It means we are rulers now, not just survivors, but leaders of a dynasty. Fleets move at our command, worlds bow to our family. And all of this, every breath we take, every step we walk, exists because you gave us the strength to see another dawn." The words struck Daniel harder than any blow. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I don't deserve this. I only shared what I had. It wasn't much. I didn't save you. You saved yourselves." But the younger sister shook her head fiercely. "No," she said. "You gave us dignity when the world gave us none. You looked at us and saw life worth saving. That was more than food. That was hope." The soldiers around them remained silent, but Daniel could see even some of their hardened faces shift, their eyes softening as if her words touched something inside them too. Daniel's neighbors were no longer whispering. They stood frozen, eyes wide, realizing they were witnessing something they would never forget. The taller sister straightened, her voice strong now. "The galaxy thinks humans are weak, worthless, barely more than tools. But we know better. We know because of you. For 10 years we searched for you, following whispers, old records, hidden trails. And now we have found you." She spread her arms wide as if presenting him to the world. "This man saved us. This human is the reason we live. His act of kindness has changed the course of history." Daniel's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He felt the weight of their words pressing down on him, heavier than the ship in the sky. He wanted to run, to hide, to escape the attention of so many eyes. But the sisters did not let him retreat. They stepped closer, their presence warm but commanding. The younger one took his rough hand in hers. Her touch was gentle but firm. "We are here to repay the debt," she said softly. "Whatever you want, power, wealth, protection, it is yours. Our fleets stand ready. The galaxy owes you more than it can ever repay." Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He looked at her hand holding his, then at the taller sister who watched him with pride and respect. Finally, he looked beyond them at the massive ship and the silent soldiers bowing to him. It was too much, too unreal. He shook his head again, whispering, "I am just a farmer." The taller sister smiled sadly. "Perhaps to yourself, but to us, you are more than a farmer. You are the one who reminded us what kindness is. You are the root of our survival, and to our people, you will be a symbol. The galaxy must see that even the smallest act of compassion can topple empires." Daniel's dog whined at his side, breaking the silence. Daniel crouched and petted its head, trying to steady himself. His mind swirled with confusion and disbelief, yet part of him felt something deeper, pride, though he dared not admit it. The younger sister leaned closer and whispered, "Do not think of what you deserve. Think of what you did. You gave life. That cannot be measured." Her eyes locked onto his, glowing with intensity, and we will never let anyone forget it. Behind them, the ship hummed softly, like a giant heart waiting for its master. The sisters stood tall again, facing Daniel as if awaiting his answer. The soldiers remained kneeling, the villagers staring, the world holding its breath. Daniel felt as though he was standing at the edge of something vast, something unstoppable. He had no choice but to accept that his small act 10 years ago had grown into something far greater than himself. And now, the galaxy was knocking at his door. Daniel sat on the wooden step of his house, his thoughts spinning like a storm inside his head. The two alien sisters stood in front of him, waiting for his answer, their eyes filled with an emotion he could not fully name. He wanted to shout at them that they were mistaken, that he was no one important, just a man who worked with broken machines and soil. But the truth was harder to deny now. The soldiers still knelt, the massive ship still hung above his fields, and the villagers still stared at him as though he was no longer the man they had known. Something inside him told him life would never return to the way it was. The younger sister knelt down beside him again, her robes brushing the dirt without care. Her voice was soft but steady. You think you are only a farmer, but to us, you are a symbol. In the darkest moment of our lives, you gave us hope. That is more powerful than you understand. She held his hand tightly, as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. Daniel's lips parted, and his words came out weak, uncertain. But I can't lead anyone. I don't know your politics, your wars, your dynasties. I only know how to fix tools and grow food. The taller sister stepped forward. Her presence was commanding, her voice firm but gentle. You do not need to know politics. You gave us a gift greater than power. You reminded us of mercy when everyone else gave us cruelty. That story has already spread. In our courts, in our councils, people whisper of the human who saved the heirs of a dynasty with a single meal. They call you the man who shared warmth. To them, you are already a legend. Daniel's stomach tightened at those words. A legend? He thought of his rough hands, his small home, the hunger that often kept him awake at night. Legends belonged in books, not in fields covered with weeds. He tried to pull his hand away, but the younger sister held it firmly, her glowing eyes locked on his. You don't need to be ready. We are ready for you. We swore an oath that if we survived, we would come back for you. Now we are here. Daniel's neighbors whispered again from a distance, their fear mixing with envy. He could hear them muttering that he had somehow tricked his way into the favor of nobles, that no human could ever deserve this kind of attention. The words stung him, but the sisters seemed not to notice. To them, the villagers were invisible. The taller sister raised her hand, and the ship above them rumbled with life. Slowly, the ramp extended again, and the golden light poured out like sunlight breaking through clouds. She gestured toward it with a graceful motion. Come with us. Leave this place. See what you have created. Our fleets, our palaces, our power. It is yours if you wish it. You will never hunger again. You will never be looked down upon again. Daniel froze, staring at the glowing path leading into the ship. His dog growled softly, uncertain. He felt torn in two directions. One part of him wanted to step onto that ramp, to see what waited inside, to finally escape the life of struggle he had endured for so long. But another part of him feared it. He feared leaving behind the only world he had ever known, feared stepping into a place where he did not belong. The younger sister stood, her hand still holding his. Do you not understand? You are not just welcome, you are necessary. Without you, we are nothing. You are the reason our dynasty rose from ashes. You are the root of our strength. Come, and let the galaxy see the man who changed fate with kindness. Daniel's chest tightened. He shook his head slowly. I can't. I don't belong in your world. His voice cracked as he added, I'm afraid. The sisters exchanged a look. For a moment, silence stretched heavy between them. Then the taller one stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do you think we were not afraid when we were children, alone in the cold? Do you think we felt ready to lead armies and rule worlds? No, but your kindness gave us the courage to rise. Let us give you the same gift now. Her words struck deep. Daniel swallowed hard, his heart fighting against his doubt. He wanted to believe her, but before he could answer, a soldier rushed forward, kneeling and speaking quickly in their language. The sisters' faces hardened. Daniel could not understand the words, but he could read the tension in their eyes. Something was wrong. The younger sister turned back to him, gripping his hand tighter. Not all welcome you as we do. There are those who fear what you represent. They will try to harm you. Her voice grew urgent. You cannot stay here. You are not safe. Daniel's body stiffened. He had lived through hunger, poverty, and neglect, but never had anyone tried to kill him for who he was. Now the thought that unseen enemies wanted his blood chilled him to the bone. His neighbors whispered louder now, some pointing, others backing away as if danger itself was spreading from his farm. The taller sister placed a protective hand on his shoulder. This is why we have come, not just to honor you, but to protect you. Our enemies know what you mean to us. If they cannot strike us, they will strike you. Daniel's mind raced. He looked at the ramp again, glowing in golden light, and realized it was not only an invitation but a lifeline. If he stayed, he might be killed. If he left, he might be dragged into wars he did not understand. Either choice carried weight heavier than anything he had ever faced. The younger sister leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, Daniel, trust us as we once trusted you. Step into our world. Let us shield you as you once shielded us." His heart thundered, his breath shallow. He looked at the crowd, at the ship, at the sisters who stared at him with desperate hope. He was no longer a man ignored by the world. He was at the center of it. And though fear gripped him, a spark inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, he could not run from this destiny forever. The ship's corridors were filled with light, polished floors reflecting Daniel's uneasy steps as he followed the two sisters deeper inside. The walls hummed with power, alive with technology far beyond anything he had ever touched. Soldiers in silver armor stood guard at every corner, their eyes fixed forward, their faces like stone. Daniel felt small among them, his simple clothes marking him as an outsider. His hands twitched nervously, itching to reach for tools he no longer carried. Everything around him was too clean, too perfect, too unreal. The sisters walked ahead with grace, their robes flowing like streams of light. They spoke softly to him as they showed him the halls lined with banners, each carrying symbols of their dynasty. "This is your home now," the younger one said, her smile warm. "Here, no one will treat you as lesser." Daniel only nodded, but his heart was heavy. He did not feel at home. He felt like a stranger who had stumbled into a world that was never meant for him. Still, a part of him felt wonder. The ship was vast, filled with chambers that glowed with energy and rooms where nobles met in hushed voices. Everywhere he walked, people bowed to the sisters. But when their eyes flicked to him, confusion and suspicion lingered. Some whispered behind their hands, others frowned openly. Daniel could not understand their words, but he knew what the looks meant. He was not welcome. He was a human in a place where humans were considered weak. That night, as Daniel tried to rest in a chamber far grander than anything he had ever known, the ship shook violently. An explosion tore through the silence, throwing him from the bed. Lights flickered red, alarms screamed, and the air filled with the scent of smoke and burning metal. The dog he had been allowed to bring with him barked wildly, claws scraping the polished floor. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest as he stumbled to his feet. The door to his chamber burst open, and soldiers rushed in. Their leader shouted quickly in the sisters' language, urgency sharp in his tone. The younger sister appeared moments later, grabbing Daniel's arm. Her eyes blazed with fear and anger. "They have come for you!" she cried. "Stay close!" Before Daniel could even ask who, the walls shook again. A hole was ripped open down the hall, flames bursting through as figures in black armor stormed in. They moved like shadows, their weapons spitting bolts of red light that cut through the silver-armored guards. Screams filled the air. The assassins were fast, merciless, and clearly prepared. The sisters drew blades from beneath their robes, the edges glowing with deadly energy. They fought with skill and fury, cutting down the first wave of attackers. Daniel stood frozen, his breath ragged, until one of the assassins broke through the line and rushed straight toward him. Panic surged through him. He had no weapons, no armor, only his bare hands. His dog leapt forward, snarling and biting at the intruder's leg, slowing him. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed a broken piece of metal pipe from the floor and swung it with all his strength. The impact cracked against the assassin's helmet, sending him sprawling to the ground. Daniel's hands shook, his chest heaving, but he was alive. The sisters pulled him forward, shielding him with their own bodies as the battle raged through the corridors. Sparks showered from the ceilings, smoke filled the air, and every step was a fight to survive. Daniel swung the pipe again and again whenever an assassin came too close, the weight of survival giving him strength he never knew he had. But even as they pushed back the attack, Daniel could see the truth in the sisters' eyes. This was not a random strike. These assassins were trained, organized, and determined. They were here for him, and him alone. Every time they shouted to each other in their harsh language, their weapons turned toward him. The sisters intercepted every blow, their blades flashing, their robes torn and stained, but they never let him fall. At one point, Daniel tripped over a fallen guard. An assassin seized the chance, raising his blade to strike, but the younger sister threw herself in front of him, the blade cutting deep into her arm. She did not cry out. She only pushed him behind her and fought harder, her face twisted in pain. Daniel's chest burned with guilt. He shouted, his voice raw, "I am not worth this." But the taller sister answered with a roar as she drove her blade through another attacker. "You are worth more than you know. Without you, none of us would exist." Her words echoed like thunder, even as blood stained her robes. Finally, the ship's reinforcements arrived, silver-armored soldiers flooding the corridor. The assassins retreated, vanishing into smoke and shadows, but not before leaving destruction in their path. The corridors were littered with bodies, flames, and broken steel. The alarm still wailed, but the immediate danger had passed. Daniel fell to his knees, the pipe clattering from his hands. His chest heaved, his body trembling. He looked at the sisters, both bloodied but standing strong. Their faces were fierce, unbroken, but their eyes told the truth. This was only the beginning. The younger sister knelt beside him, her injured arm wrapped quickly by one of her guards. She gripped his shoulder with her good hand, her voice low but steady. "Do you see now? They will not stop. To them, you are a threat because of what you represent. They would rather kill you than let the galaxy see the truth." Daniel's lips trembled. He looked around at the dead and the wounded, the smoke and flames, and shook his head. "I never asked for this. I only gave food to 2 children." His words cracked, heavy with despair. The taller sister crouched in front of him, lifting his chin so his eyes met hers. Her gaze was unyielding, her voice sharp with conviction. "And that is why you must live, because you did not ask for power, but power found you. Because you did not act for reward, but for kindness. That is why they fear you, Daniel. That is why they will never stop coming." Daniel's chest tightened, his mind spinning, but deep inside he felt something stir. A flicker of strength, small but undeniable. He had fought, he had survived, and he had seen how much they were willing to risk for him. For the first time, he began to understand that he could not run from this fate. He would either stand or be destroyed. The ship's fires hissed under the sprays of machines, the alarms fading slowly into silence. But in Daniel's heart, the noise only grew louder. He had entered this ship as a farmer. He was leaving this battle as something else entirely, a man whose choice would shape the galaxy. The fires in the ship's corridors had been put out, but Daniel could still smell the smoke in the air. His clothes were stained with dust and blood, his hands raw from gripping the broken pipe he had used as a weapon. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. Around him, soldiers carried away the bodies of both assassins and guards. The silence that followed the chaos was heavy, almost crushing. The 2 sisters stood in front of him, their robes torn, their faces marked with sweat and streaks of blood. They looked exhausted, but their eyes were still sharp and filled with determination. Daniel stared at them, his mind spinning. He whispered hoarsely, "I don't understand. I am no one. Why do they want me dead so badly?" The taller sister stepped closer, her voice firm but soft. "Because you are proof that kindness can change everything. To the powerful, that is more dangerous than any weapon. And they rule with fear, with cruelty, with control. But you remind people that compassion can topple empires. That terrifies them." Her words struck deep. Daniel looked down at his shaking hands. He thought of the night 10 years ago, the 2 starving girls, and the single meal he had given. That small act had led him here, surrounded by soldiers, hunted by assassins, standing at the center of a storm that stretched across the galaxy. It was overwhelming. He shook his head. "I never asked for this. I never wanted this." The younger sister knelt beside him, her injured arm still bound in cloth. She placed her hand gently on his chest. "Neither did we. We did not choose to be orphans, left to die. We did not choose to become rulers, but fate chose us, just as it has chosen you." Her eyes glowed softly as she whispered, "Please, Daniel, do not turn away. The galaxy needs to see what we saw that night, a human who gave when he had nothing to spare." Daniel's heart pounded. He felt the weight of her words pressing on him, heavier than the walls of steel around them. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he pushed himself to his feet. His legs trembled, but he stood tall. The soldiers turned their eyes toward him. The sisters watched silently, waiting for his choice. He looked at the broken corridor, at the destruction caused simply because of who he was. He thought of the villagers who would one day hear of this, the whispers that would spread across the stars. He knew then that he could not hide, no matter how much he wanted to. He raised his head and spoke, his voice steady though his heart still raced. I was no one. I gave 2 children food because it was right. If that act shakes your empires, then maybe your empires are built on nothing. His words carried through the hall, louder than he intended. Soldiers froze, their faces hard but their eyes wide. Some exchanged glances, their hands tightening on their weapons, as if his words had broken something deep inside them. Even the sisters looked at him with awe. The taller one whispered, "Do you see? Even now, your voice reaches them." Daniel stepped forward, his dog padding close beside him. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a strange light. He looked at the soldiers, at the guards who had risked their lives, and even at the wounded men being carried past. I am not your king. I am not your commander. I am just a man. But if one meal, one act of kindness can make this much noise, then maybe it is time you all ask yourselves what you are fighting for. Fear or hope? A heavy silence followed. Then slowly, one of the soldiers lowered his weapon and pressed his fist to his chest in a gesture of respect. Another followed, then another, until the entire hall echoed with the sound of armored fists striking breastplates. They were saluting him, a human farmer. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to step back, to deny them, but the sisters moved beside him, their presence firm and unyielding. The taller one raised her voice, clear and commanding. From this day forward, the man who saved us will stand as our equal. No throne, no crown, but a symbol the galaxy cannot ignore. The human who shared warmth. The soldiers roared in unison, their voices like thunder. The sound shook Daniel's bones, filled the corridors, and spread out into the stars. He felt dizzy, but also strangely alive. For the first time, he realized that this was bigger than him, bigger than his fears. He was no longer a shadow in a forgotten village. He was a fire that had already been lit, and no one could put it out. Later, when the ship returned to orbit, Daniel stood at the window of a great chamber, looking down at the planet he once called home. The fields, the small house, the life of quiet struggle, all of it seemed like a dream now. The sisters stood beside him, silent, giving him space to think. His dog rested at his feet, tail thumping softly against the floor. He whispered to himself, I don't know if I can be what they need me to be. The younger sister's voice was gentle. You already are. You always were. You just didn't know it. The taller one added, her eyes fixed on the stars. This is only the beginning. Others will come. Other dynasties, other rulers. They will want to see the man who changed destiny. Some will come with gifts. Some will come with blades. But they will all come. Daniel's chest tightened. He felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on him, but also a strange calm. He had lived through hunger, loneliness, and despair, and yet he had endured. Perhaps he could endure this too. As the ship drifted among the stars, a messenger entered the chamber, bowing deeply before the sisters. His voice trembled as he spoke. Other dynasties have heard the story. They demand to meet the human at once. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, his gaze steady. He was afraid, yes, but he was no longer the man who walked past suffering with empty hands. He was the man who chose kindness, and that choice had already changed the galaxy. Whatever came next, he would face it.